Good morning. Apple CEO Steve Jobs wrote a rare 29-paragraph open letter attacking Adobe's Flash video software as having major technical drawbacks. In fact, Jobs said that Adobe is suitable only for PCs and, get this, mice. So, of course, Adobe fired back, saying that Jobs' comments are only a smokescreen. Right now, I'm joined by Brad Reback. He's an analyst at Oppenheimer Co. And Brad, Steve Jobs going on the offensive, that doesn't happen very often. Who is he really talking to here?
Well, Scarlet, I think he's aggressively trying to woo the developer community to get people who've traditionally developed in Adobe tools, Flash specifically, to move over to the Apple platform and start developing aggressively for things like the iPhone and the iPad.
So it sounds like this rift is more about Apple than it is about Apple versus Adobe.
Yeah, I think from Steve Jobs' point of view, he wants to make sure that consumers get the best available apps and apps that consume the most functionality from his products. And in order for that to happen, they have to use Apple-specific development tools.
Now, for Adobe, how much does this Apple rift cost the company in terms of brand and reputation? I mean, we're not earnings just yet, but in terms of consumers' perception of the company.
You know, from a developer standpoint, I don't think it hurts them that much. From a consumer standpoint, it may cause some confusion. But from a financial standpoint, there's really very little impact here in the short term. It's a much more open-ended, longer-term question. Can Steve be successful moving developers to Apple and thus no longer needing some of the Adobe tools?
And when will we get any indication of that happening?
So, Scarlet, as you said, Adobe's set to report later in June. They have a new product release called Creative Suite 5, which just shipped. The early uptake of that should be quite strong. So I don't think we'll get any near-term indication of people switching or moving away from the Adobe platform. I think it'll take quite some time.
In the meantime, do consumers, people who use their iPhone, you and me, for instance, suffer because Apple refuses to use Adobe Flash?
There's no doubt on the margin there's frustration for people like ourselves. We may go to a website that's created in Flash. We're going to get a little blue Lego on that screen instead of the content from that site that we're looking for. But as Steve pointed out in his letter, more and more content providers are writing directly to open standards that are available via the iPhone and the iPad, and as a result, there's less of that headwind.
How costly is it for a company, not just Adobe, but any company really, to be kind of in the crosshairs of Apple's anger or displeasure?
Well, it's clearly no fun for the stockholders of those stocks. From a financial standpoint for those companies, it's probably not that much of a near-term issue, but definitely for investors, it creates a headwind for multiples on those stocks. And I think as we've seen Adobe stock here recently over the last 6 months, it's treaded water, and I think a lot of that has to do with some of the noise coming out of Apple.
You call it noise. Is it likely to be more than noise at any point? And what would be the tipping point?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think over time it does have the potential to be more than noise if Apple's successful getting more and more people writing directly to their platform and not needing the Adobe tools. But once again, I think it's going to take the better part of years to see that, not quarters.
Now, Steve Jobs also challenged Adobe by saying that maybe Adobe should go in the direction of creating HTML5, gosh, I don't know this programming code, software instead. Would Adobe actually go in that direction, capitulate and go in that direction?
I think over time Adobe's going to have to support HTML5. There's too much support out there from the likes of Apple, Google, and eventually Microsoft as it relates to this open video standard on the web. That being said, you would still need Adobe tools to help you create that content and edit that content. So they will definitely support it, and I think that brings up the bigger question. Steve Jobs, I think, is still angry to some extent the fact that Adobe hasn't been probably as aggressive supporting the OS X platform, the operating system for Mac, as they probably should have been.